Please rise and bow your spirit and join us in our in-gathering song, number 1006 in the Teal hymnal, In My Quiet Sorrow.
Between verses 72 and 3.
Good morning, everybody. As best as can be. As we begin, please turn off all electronic devices, and I invite you to enjoy the chapel at the back of the sanctuary and note joys and concerns in the book there. If you have little ones, we have a nursery downstairs. We also broadcast the service on the closed circuit TV, which is located in the social hall near this nursery, if you need to stay downstairs. After the service, I invite everyone downstairs to enjoy hospitality and the opportunity to greet one another. Finally, please note the announcements in your order of service with the many ways to be engaged in this vibrant community. Come, come, whoever you are. You are welcome here. No matter your age, your size, the color of your eyes, your hair, your skin, you are welcome here. No matter whom you love, how you speak, or whatever your abilities, you are welcome here. You are welcome here whether you come with laughter in your heart or tears. You are welcome here. If you come here with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands, you are welcome here.
Thank you, Paul. Good morning, dear ones. Good morning. I'm so glad you're here. Back in early September, the worship committee met for a day-long retreat. And during that retreat, we talked about our ideas about the purposes of worship, our own attitudes towards worship, and we talked about what we saw as the spiritual needs of the church. And we chose monthly themes for the fall season. For October, we chose grief. We thought we were wise in that choice. All big changes can include an element of grief, and certainly the departure of Reverend Patty and our music director Lou, Those were big changes. But we had no idea what was coming, both in our nation and within our congregation. Today's service was planned before we learned of the passing of John Carrillo. Some of us knew John well, others did not. And I know that John's passing reminds us of other losses that we hold in our hearts. And our individual and collective grief is compounded and complicated. There are so many layers to it. So today's service will talk about grieving. For some, it may be helpful. And for some, it may be too much, too soon. Wherever you lie in that spectrum, I invite you, encourage you to take care of yourself today and take care of each other. So if you need to step out and step to the back or go over wherever you need to for a quiet place, please feel free to do that. Please feel free to do that. And there's boxes of Kleenex around, so keep an eye out for those too. I'm really grateful that this service is being led by Sinnamon Wolfe. She's a hospice chaplain with deep insights into grief. And I'm also grateful that we're joined this morning by some of the chaplains who are in our congregation. John Cooper is here. John, can you raise your hand? He's an affiliate minister with our congregation here at South Valley. And Mel Welliver, are you here, Mel? Okay. Anyways, if you need someone to offer a caring ear, please know that Cinnamon and John and I and your peers on the pews next to you and the chairs next to you are here for you. I want to let you know that there'll be a memorial service for John later this week. We haven't firmed up the date yet. I hope to know by the end of today, and I'll let you know as soon as I know. Until then, we need to hold each other tenderly. This is a time to be extra kind, to be extra generous. And in that spirit, come, let us worship together. Please join me in singing hymn number 83, Winds Be Still. That's in our great hymnal. Please rise and embody your spirit.
Please join me up front. Okay, thank you. Hello. So like Reverend Bob mentioned, today we're talking about grief. And grief is kind of hard to describe. Yeah, sadness is the word that we most use to describe grief, but it's a little bit more involved and it tends to last a little bit longer. So this is one of my favorite books to talk about grief. It's called Tears. Oh, it's Tear Soup. And it's about a lady named Grandy. There once was an old and somewhat wise woman whom everyone called Grandy. She just suffered a big loss in her life. Pops, her husband, suffered the same loss, but in his own way. This is the story of how Grandy faced her loss by setting out to make tear soup. Because of her great loss, Grandy knew this time her recipe for tear soup would call for a big pot. With a big pot, she would have plenty of room for all the memories, all the misgivings, all the feelings, and all the tears she needed to stew in the pot over time. See, so there's a bunch of little pots, and she picked the biggest one she could find. She put on her apron because she knew it would get messy. It seems that grief is never clean. People feel misunderstood, feelings get hurt, and wrong assumptions are made all over the place. To make matters worse, grief always takes longer to cook than anyone wants it to. And then Grandy started to cry. At first, she sobbed. I think this is descending. Sometimes she wept quietly, and sometimes when she was in a safe place where no one could hear her. Thank you. She even wailed. So she's in her car crying. The old and somewhat wise woman reflected on her own special recipe as she looked down into the large overflowing pot of memories. It was a task she would repeat many times during the next few months. It's a very long book, so the red tape is me editing. Grandy winced when she took a sip of the broth. All she could taste was salt from her teardrops. It tasted bitter, but she knew this was where she had to start. And for now, it was the only thing on her menu. There were things that Grandy never wanted to forget. These included the good times and the bad times, the silly and the sad times. With her arms full of memories, Grandy made many trips to the kitchen. One at a time, she slowly stirred all her precious and not so precious memories into the pot. But eventually, she ran out of things to add. Grandy's arms ached and she felt stone cold. There were no words that could describe the pain she was feeling. What's more, when she looked out the window, it surprised her to see how the rest of the world was going on as usual, while her world had stopped. Her grandson Chester, who just wanted his Grandy to be happy, again hoped his chocolate drops would make her feel better. Mrs. Bloomklotz, Mrs. Chadwick, and Mr. Long, all brave yet filthy neighbors, dropped by to see how Grandy was doing. They filled the air with words, but none of their words took the smell of tear soup away. Grandy was gracious because she knew how helpless her friends felt. They wanted to fix her, but they couldn't. All Grandy really needed from them in that moment was a knowing look and a warm hug. "I'm here," Midge cried. "I got here as fast as I could, and I'll be here whenever you need me." "What a tragedy. I'm so sorry you're having to make such a big pot of soup." Oh, what a relief. Grandy knew she didn't have to be careful what she said around Midge. Midge wouldn't try to talk her out of anything she was feeling, and Grandy could even laugh and not worry that Midge would assume Grandy was over her grief. "I don't know what to say, but I'll be glad to listen," Midge said tenderly. "Come on, tell me about it while we make some bread to go along with your soup." These two friends, who had shared 1,000 laughs and just as many tears, pounded at the bread dough together. Next, her recipe called for some comfort food. For Grandy, this meant mashed potatoes or ice cream. Comfort food always makes you feel better, at least for a little while. It gets past that big lump in your throat when other foods can't. I think it needs some chocolate too. After all, it was her soup. On some afternoons, people would ask questions like, "Is it soup yet?" Or, "How long is this going to take? You have been at this for over a month now. It's time to get out of the kitchen." Grandy fumed at the caller's advice. Grandy looked forward to getting the mail each day. She dreaded the day when no more sympathy cards would come. Making tear soup is hard work. Sometimes it was all she could think about. Even the things Grandy used to love to do, she didn't have the energy for, nor did she care about anymore. Grandy knew there were times when she needed to take a break from her soup making. Even though it was hard to do, she forced herself to get away. One day, as Grandy and Chester were going for a drive, Chester asked, "Mom says you've been making tear soup. What does she mean?" Well, tear soup is a way for you to sort through all the different types of feelings and memories you have when you lose someone or something special. Remember when your baby brother died right before he was born and your mom sat for days holding his blanket and weeping? She was making tear soup. You made tear soup yourself by acting out your own disappointment when you shouted at your friend. And when your friend Billy's dog died and he didn't want to play with you, not feeling like having fun is one of the ingredients of tear soup. And when Aunt Meg got divorced and they had to move, there was a lot of tear soup simmering in that house. Some days when you're making tear soup, it's even hard to breathe. Some days you feel like running away. You just hope a better day comes along soon. And then comes one of the hardest parts of making tear soup. It's when you decide it might be okay to eat something instead of the soup all the time. The next morning, as Grandy was cleaning up, Chester asked her if she was done making tear soup. Well, I don't think you actually ever finish. The hard work of making this batch of soup is almost done, though. I'll put the rest in the freezer, and we'll pull it out from time to time to have a little taste. So what else have you learned by making tear soup, Grandy? I've learned that grief, like a pot of soup, changes the longer it simmers and the more things you put into it. I've learned that sometimes people say unkind things, but they don't really mean to hurt you. And most importantly, I've learned that there is something down deep within all of us, ready to help us survive the things we think we can't survive. Grandy, you know so much, said Chester. What will I do after you die? Don't worry. I will leave you my recipe for tear soup. Well, thank you for listening to my story, and let us sing you downstairs.
Let us now enter into a time of reflection and prayer. We remember all those who struggle with illness, be it mental or physical, emotional or spiritual. May they find healing and comfort. May all those who care for the sick find comfort too and support, and may they know that through their efforts, they bring love into the world. We remember the activists who protested at the West Valley District Attorney's office this week and who were met there by white supremacists. We give thanks for their willingness to put their bodies in the way of oppression and of racism. We remember Oscar Romero, a priest in El Salvador, who spoke out against poverty and injustice, who was assassinated while leading worship. May his elevation to sainthood in the Catholic Church remind all of us of our obligation to look out for the least and the last and the lost. We ask for blessings for all those affected by climate change, who lost their homes and even loved ones in the storms. May they find security and safety. And may we find a collective will to change before it's too late. We give thanks for all those who advocate on behalf of our planet. May they find success. We consider those times when we fell short of our best selves and did not fully live into our Unitarian Universalist values. We forgive ourselves, we forgive others, and we begin again in love. We lift up the memory of John Carrillo and ask for blessings upon him. May he have found peace and freedom from pain. And we ask for mercy and compassion for the Carrillo family. May they find consolation in their memories of John. And may they know that the love and support of this congregation goes with them wherever they go. We remember all those who mourn. We give thanks for this congregation and ask for blessings on it. In this difficult time, may we remember all the things that we can still be grateful for. And may we hold each other close, for we are all in this together. And may we all be held in the heart of love. Amen. Blessed be.
It is our practice here at South Valley to split our worship service offering with a charitable organization or program that aligns with our values and principles. For September and October, we will be donating to American Nepali Students and Women's Education Relief. Answer: a nonprofit, nonpartisan, non-religious organization that currently is empowering over 600 low-caste children and youth by providing them 12 to 15 years of education through college with careful academic and career counseling. Will you join with me in saying the words printed in the order of service for our offering? We are this church. We are its hands, its heart, its voice. Together we share in the wealth of this community and sustain it with our gifts. Valley Student and Women's Education Relief, and South Valley, thank you for your gifts. It's not a good time for this, though.
This is by Mary Oliver in Blackwater Woods. Look, the trees are turning their own bodies into pillars of light, are giving off the rich fragrance of cinnamon and fulfillment. The long tapers of cattails are bursting and floating away over the blue shoulders of the ponds. And every pond, no matter what its name is nameless now. Every year, everything I have ever learned in my lifetime leads back to this. The fires and the black river of loss, whose other side is salvation, whose meaning none of us will ever know. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things. To love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it. And when the time comes to let go, to let it go.
actually see you. So when I first thought of this service and came up with the title, The Blessings of Letting Go, I was thinking of all the times in hospice when people are ready. And it's a relief both for them and their families when they pass. I was also thinking about life transitions and the blessings and growth that can come with letting go of habits or negative situations. However, as time went on and the service drew near, I became nervous. I thought, what have I gotten myself into? I became nervous because the last thing I want to do as a chaplain and just as a person in life is dismiss or minimize the pain and loss of others. As a chaplain, we are trained to never use platitudes. We don't say things like, heaven needed another angel, or God will never give you more than you can handle. And now, in light of John's death and other losses this community is facing, I especially wanted to take a more sensitive approach to this service. And I realized as I was driving here that I was speaking to two different people in this message. I'm speaking to those who aren't facing a significant loss, but are wondering what to do around those who are. And then I'm also speaking to those who are. Grief is a difficult thing to talk about. Many of us, when faced with the grief of another, are immediately flooded with reminders of our own pain, our own losses. We become uncomfortable and want the pain to go away, so we try to dismiss or fix the other person. We try to make them feel better and quickly. Or we avoid the topic and the person grieving altogether. We distract ourselves with happier thoughts and activities. It is very difficult to support those who grieve if we can't grieve ourselves. We as a society don't grieve very well. We look to quick fixes and distractions. We have unhealthy obsessions with youth, beauty, and entertainment. We avoid the uncomfortable. We try to defy aging and death. We avoid discussions about difficult changes and conflict. One of the reasons we avoid talking about grief is because we usually only associate it with death and tragedies too difficult to bear. On the one hand, that rings true for many of us. Death, especially the death of those close to us, hits us particularly hard, and it tends to stay with us the longest. However, death is not the only time we grieve in our lives. We face losses in the form of moving, career transitions, divorces at the end of relationships, the loss of a pet, health changes that impact our daily life and sense of self. And now many of us are grieving major changes in society. We no longer recognize our country. This community specifically is also facing the loss of Reverend Patty and Lou. These other losses also cause us grief and provide opportunities for us to develop ways of caring for ourselves and each other, and ways of processing difficult emotions. Breakups are good, albeit obvious, examples of how we grieve. What do we do when our hearts are broken? We cry. We lean on close friends. We watch movies and listen to music that pull on our heartstrings in just the right way. And then we cry some more. We do the difficult things, like pack up all the stuff they left behind. We find new routines that don't involve that person. And then we cry some more. piece by tear-stained piece, we reconstruct our lives without that person in it. When I was in seminary, I struggled in one of my classes. It was an ethics class where we got to explore all those cheery, hopeful topics such as injustice, racial oppression, animal abuse, in particular the abuse of animals in the meat and dairy industry, and to top it all off, environmental destruction and climate change. Whew. Needless to say, I got a little depressed. I began to feel overwhelmed, helpless, and numb. I noticed that these emotions did nothing to help me to respond to these ethical situations. In actuality, it seemed to have the opposite effect. I wanted to retreat and avoid it all, which would have made me an even less ethical person than when I began the class. This experience led to a cumulative project where I focused on the importance of processing difficult emotions, including grief, in the light of climate change and environmental destruction. Turns out, I wasn't alone. Joanna Macy noticed the same emotional response and immobility during the nuclear arms race era. She coined the term sustaining the gaze. Macy posits that it is necessary to do the difficult work of paying attention to what is happening in the world, even when it is difficult. She helped people do this by creating support groups, much like a grief support group, where she led various exercises designed to attend to the emotions people were experiencing in a supportive environment. Similarly, during the civil rights movement, leaders would lead exercises where people would role play being faced with an angry mob so that when the time came, they wouldn't react violently. They practiced nonviolent resistance by familiarizing themselves with volatile emotions and learning how to remain calm in the midst of them. Difficult, to say the least. So it is with grief. Giving ourselves space and time to grieve the losses in our lives, big and small, helps us become less reactive. We become less reactive in the moment because we're not surprised by our own emotions. If it sounds overwhelming, you're not wrong. It can be. Grieving is an active process. It takes up a lot of energy and it's exhausting, which is why it can't just be about the tears. Since Joanna Macy, there has been much work done in what is called eco-psychology. Look up the words eco-psychology or ecotherapy on Amazon and you will find plenty of books to fill your wish list. My research suggested two things. Actually, it suggested more, but it's been a while, so I don't remember it all. We need to both grieve the losses we are noticing with the environment, and we need to create positive experiences that connect us to nature, which provides some much-needed respite from the tragedy and an experience of being nurtured by nature. To reconnect with the beauty and awe of nature, to be comforted by the smell of rain, a cool breeze on a hot day, the sound of a babbling brook, the taste of honeysuckle and berries. Reconnecting helps us rest, refuel, and it reminds us of what is good, beautiful, and lovely in life. It gives us hope and meaning. Be kind to yourselves when you grieve. Take breaks. Do something fun every once in a while. Get out into nature. If you enjoy crafts or art, do something creative. And sleep in. make pancakes, and then take a nap. Sleep is an important way for our brain to process transitions and emotions. Do not be surprised if you are facing a major transition in life if you find yourself tired. That makes sense. Your brain is letting you know what it needs. And your body. We feel this in our bodies, and our bodies are tired. Oddly enough, this project is part of what led me into a chaplain internship. It actually sealed the deal, talking about it. And during my chaplain internship in Arizona, I co-facilitated a perinatal loss support group. This was a support group for parents who suffered a loss of pregnancy either through miscarriage or stillbirth or a loss of a newborn. The group was filled with primarily mothers, and these women became very close and then quickly became experts on their own on grief. Perinatal loss can be a uniquely isolating experience. Many women are told to move on, to have another child, or focus on the ones they already have, as if that makes up for the loss of this child. These parents also shared that a big part of their grief was the loss of what could have been. They never got to bathe their child, teach them how to walk, or throw them a first birthday party. They never got to parent their child. This was especially difficult for those who didn't have another child, because people would often not acknowledge that they were mothers or fathers at all. A significant way these parents supported each other was by acknowledging and naming the ways they were still parents. They were parents whose child who had died. They were mothering their child in the womb. They parented their child as they prepared their homes during the pregnancy. And they continue to parent by grieving their child. The love and care a mother and father, parent, has for their child does not end when the child dies. Grieving their children, naming them, keeping pictures and mementos in the home to acknowledge the child's presence in their life, even throwing birthday parties on due dates were all ways they found to continue loving and grieving their children. They had to learn how to love them even when they weren't there anymore. Grief, in many ways, is about reorienting our lives from loving someone who is present to loving them when they are gone. Grief isn't just evidence of loss, it is more so evidence of love. When my aunt was dying, I couldn't be with her. I was living in California at the time. So I painted that picture of the wolf for her because I needed to find a way, any way, to connect with her. And in my family, we have an old and very tattered Christmas ornament with the picture of my uncle on it. He passed away when I was a child, but every year, come Christmas, that tattered ornament is hung on the tree. And last year, on the anniversary of my grandmother's death, my mother and I got matching dandelion seed tattoos to remember her and my grandpa. As a hospice chaplain, I don't have special phrases or prayers that I say that make people feel better. Nothing I can say can do that. But I do ask questions. I ask people to tell me about their loved one. Eventually, stories will emerge. I hear happy stories, funny stories, and even stories about them when they were just so mad at them, but now they just laugh. The grief makes its way through the stories. People begin to acknowledge what they are going to miss and how their lives are changing. That is how their grief journey begins. So if you are grieving, cry when you need to cry. Watch that movie for 100th time. Listen to that CD over and over and over again if you need to. Get that tattoo. Pore over those pictures. Giggle because you just love that feisty look in their eyes. Celebrate birthdays and set an extra table setting during the holidays for as long as you need to. Visit the graveside and talk a lot to those close friends that you can trust and listen to. Do what you need to do to celebrate and honor the love that you have. Love and love boldly. Please join us in our closing song, number 1057, in the Teal hymnal, Go Lift It Up. Please rise and bow to your seat.
Oh
We covered a lot today, so I let you go with this blessing. Be gentle with yourself. You are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. In the noise and confusion of life, keep peace in your soul. Be gentle with yourselves.